This is Connected Care Live, conversations with innovators and wellness professionals from all across the continuum of care. This series is supported by Solutionize, leaders in healthcare IT. You can find our entire archive of conversations on a range of topics in healthcare at www.solutionize.com. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm Steve Cohen, your host, and today we are speaking with Bonnie O'Brien, the founder and executive director of Transition Professionals, an organization dedicated to helping people in the process of reentry from incarceration. Bonnie, welcome to Connected Care Live.
Thanks, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you.
Now, normally we talk about healthcare on Connected Care Live and the ways in which healthcare critically depends on connecting participants in the process. But we're making a little departure from our usual conversations today. We are going to talk about another area of human life that depends critically on connectivity, which is the reentry into mainstream society after leaving prison. Bonnie, to set a little context for our listeners, I want to start with a staggering statistic you shared with me. 1 out of every 31 adults in the United States is under some form of correctional supervision. 1 out of 31, a rate 5 times higher than any other place in the developed world. That absolutely blew me away.
That's a phenomenal number, and that is not just people who are incarcerated, but those statistics include anybody who may be on probation, may be on parole, on any sort of intensive supervision, anything that is linking them still to the law enforcement and the criminal justice system. So we have a lot of people who, for instance, Megan Law, in New Jersey, we have Megan's Law, and that's for sex offenders. They're going to be on supervision for life. So, some people may be on 3 years probation, others on 5, but this number, which is a phenomenal number, shows that there are thousands and thousands of people who have come out of incarceration or have had some sort of incident in the criminal justice system, and they remain on some sort of supervision, either probation, parole, or, as I mentioned, ISP.
So why don't you start off by telling us about some of the challenges that face someone transitioning from prison back to, do we call it civilian life? I'm not even sure how to describe the
We call it
difference.
Back to community. There's a lot of misnomers. We don't like to call our clients convicted felons, even though they might be, because of the stigma that's associated with saying someone is a felon. Even getting away from the term ex-offender is something that we're trying to do in order to give people the chance to get away from the stigma that's associated with it. But the challenges are great. Coming out of jail or prison, first of all, the first factor is, where are you going to go? Do you have some place that's going to provide a roof over your head? Is there a shelter? Are you going to live with family or friends? Many people who become incarcerated are abandoned. Their family doesn't want anything to do with them anymore. Their friends don't want anything to do with them anymore. So coming back is a real problem if that's the case. So once we identify where someone is going to go and that the fact that they have some sort of shelter, and not have to be on the streets, then we say, okay, the next thing is, do you have ID? Because you can't get anything done in this world unless you have proper documents of identification. So, if you don't have ID, what is it going to take for us to get you ID? Because once you have ID, of course, then you're eligible for employment, but there's other services that you'd be eligible for as well. So getting that ID is paramount. And then every person is individual from there on. What does that individual need? We have people who go into jail in the summertime and come out in the wintertime, and they may have gone in with shorts and, sandals. So we need to provide them with clothing. I have a woman that's coming out that went in August, and she's coming out actually, I think it's the day after Thanksgiving. And she said, I have, flip-flops and my shorts, and I have nothing else. And so that's when we, step in gear. I get her size and I say, what is it you need? And I will drop off a bag of clothing to you prior to you getting out so that you'll have something that you can walk out the door with. There's all sorts of things. You mentioned health. and connecting. I mean, we are a connector. We connect people to whatever resources are available. I've dealt with people who've been in jail and they've had cancer and they needed to be connected in the community with a good doctor. People who have mental health issues, they need to be connected with therapists. People who are suffering from addiction, they obviously don't need to detox because they're coming out of jail, but they may need to continue their recovery with an intense outpatient program, or they may need to, continue their recovering with medication-assisted treatment, which we also do in the local jail, but it's something that has to be consistent once they get out in order to manage their recovery and make sure that they're progressing.
Now, you gave me another incredible statistic along those lines, that 1 in 5 people in U.S. prisons or jails have been convicted of a drug offense. Again, an incredible number. So I assume that the vast majority of these people are in some way users of drugs, licit or illicit, right?
So that's interesting. A lot of people have been put away because they smoked pot. And unfortunately for them, the tides are changing. Even here in New Jersey, they're talking about legalizing marijuana. And I don't know what's going to happen to all of those people that have been incarcerated because they smoked pot, but I would hope that, as the laws are changed into the favor of those people that are, going to be recreational smoking, that the people that are incarcerated because they did it previously are going to be handled and hopefully freed. But marijuana isn't the biggest issue we have. The biggest issue we have in this area has always been heroin. It's interesting that I have found many people that I've dealt with in the jail are dealers, and they did not use themselves, but they found a way to make some fast money and they became sellers. So they figured, what the heck, I can sell the stuff and make plenty of money and, not have to use it. And that's the way they, are able to survive. Those people also have gone to jail. At prison. So it's all across the board. We have a huge crisis now with fentanyl. I'm seeing more and more in the, eastern area here of people using crystal meth. That used to be something I used to see more in the Midwest, but now it's really, it's abundant. So between the fentanyl, crystal meth, the PCP that's, used in marijuana, the drugs have become much stronger. They have become, I think, I can't say more addictive because they're addictive to begin with, but I think more deadly in so much that we're seeing more deaths. We're seeing more use of Narcan. We're seeing more issues of people who are really succumbing to this horrible epidemic that we're all experiencing.
So I understand that substance abuse disorder, addiction, can often lead to criminal behavior, although you've noted that many people, it sounds like, are in the criminal justice system, not for use, but for just other involvement in it. But you had also suggested to me when we spoke that sometimes causality runs in the other direction, and that time in prison can actually lead to addiction. Is that right?
Yeah, I've encountered people that weren't addicts before they went away, and now that they've come back, had the opportunity to use some sort of drug, and it's usually heroin because heroin's cheap. I mean, in this area, you can get it for $3 a bag. It's cheap. It's a cheap drug. So maybe somebody did a favor for someone while they were behind bars, and they were repaid back with a bag of heroin, and that started to hook them. So, there's been people that have come out of prison and they may have been in prison for, several years and come out hooked on heroin, whereas when they went in, they never even had tried heroin.
Which obviously creates a whole new raft of potential problems for them in terms of reentry.
Absolutely. And those people, you had also mentioned that, what kind of crimes are associated with people with addiction. Well, once they start running out of money, then they're going to be looking for some way to feed their habit. And that turns into shoplifting. Boy, I have to take a look at the statistics we have on that, because that is probably the number one thing that an addict is going to try and do, is going to shoplift. And then you've got theft and robbery and all of the other associated crimes, which start to snowball. Once someone is used to getting that money by picking off something and stealing something, they're going to keep doing it because they have that habit to feed, and that habit only grows.
And now I want to go back to something you said earlier, but it relates to this, that when people come out, sometimes their family doesn't want to have anything more to do with them. And so not only is there the where do I go, but there's a little bit of what do I do? I mean, all of us have a web of connections in our lives to the people in our community. It starts with family, but grows outward to friends and people we work with, and so on and so forth, which sounds like these connections can be ruptured by time in prison. If I went away on vacation, or if I just took a job abroad for a year or two, I'd like to think that my family would welcome me home, or that I'd have friends that I would come back to. Prison, which can be, a year or many years, there's probably a little difference in how my reception might be. And so I would guess that there are some trust issues for people coming out of prison as well.
And that's what it's all about, because if you've done something to family and friends, what's going to be done before they can trust you again? So you have to kind of build that trust. Not too long ago, we had somebody who he had been writing to me probably for 6 months before we got out of prison. And his name was Carlos. And Carlos would send me these letters, and I'd get letters once a month. And basically, he was afraid to come out. He had been sent down to prison from a jail here in Jersey, and he had been in prison for 30 years. And he'd been involved with, some gangsters way back when, and, did some bad deeds, and spent 30 years of his life in prison. And now it was time for him to come out. And he was terrified because he had none of his family or friends were back in this area, and they had all moved out of the area. He didn't even know if they were still interested in talking to him or being a part of his life. He didn't know what he was going to do. He was in his early 50s, and he said, I don't even know what kind of a job I can get anymore. I don't know. I have no skills. And it's funny because there's, he was a very easy to get along with and know person, but he said, I got on that bus from prison, and when that bus started talking, I freaked out, because buses now they'll announce the next stop, but back 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. So it was interesting to, see Carlos readapt to society. And one of the issues that we have is when someone, who has his kind of background gets out, they have no idea what they're going to do. So we sat with him and we worked with him, and we learned that while he was in prison, he was a baker. And he apparently was a pretty good baker, because the warden actually had asked him on several occasions if he would bake cakes for, his family and things like that, because Carlos was a good baker. So we said, well, Carlos, if you had, such good references that the warden even wanted you to bake for him, we don't see why you can't get a job. So we constructed a resume, and we used his prison experience and all of the things he baked and everything that he made and all of the ingredients he used, and we created a resume. And luckily, the way the economy is now is that there's plenty of jobs, and there's, I think, in some areas of industry, some forgiveness for crime. And Carlos actually, within a month, had landed 5 interviews and 3 job offers. And we were like, wow, Carlos, this is great. There was some new donut places opening up, and he was going to work there. And he started off and he started doing great. And then his family started to come back into his life. And he had 2 sisters that lived in Florida, and they decided they wanted to see him. And so he went down to see them. He was very nervous, very afraid, what kind of the rest of the family, how are they going to react to him? But they really missed him. And I guess that there had been some sadness recently in their family. One of them had lost a son to addiction. So, it just makes family members closer when sad times occur. So he went down there and he moved down there. And the last time he called me, Carlos said, "You'll never believe this. I'm managing a gigantic Walmart. I bought a house. I have a car and a boat, and I'm dating a doctor." And I was so thrilled. This is a man who spent 30 years behind bars baking and now was able to really have a second chance upon his release and upon his return to the community. So I'm very proud of him, and he's doing well, and he will continue to do well. And that's why we're here. That's what we like to see.
So, that's a great, that's like an American success story that just happens to have prison time thrown into it. It would be a great story even without the prison.
Yep.
So, what are some of the indicators maybe that you would see where that might lead to, that you could say this one's going to be success and this one might not be headed in the right direction? Are there things you can see, even before exit or?
Yes. So we do work with people in the jail. We run the reentry program in the jail. We meet with people who are within 90 days of release. And there are times where people just don't want to have anybody help them. They don't want to give up doing drugs. They, and that the clear indicators are, number one, if someone says to me, "I don't want to be on probation anymore," you have to ask, well, why not? Why are you so, dead set on having probation? Is it because you want to use drugs and don't want to be drug tested? Is it because you don't want anybody looking over your shoulder? So, there's a lot of indicators. If someone doesn't want to talk about, any resources that are out there for people with addiction, you kind of know that they're not interested in getting clean and staying clean. They still want to do what they want to do, even though, our drugs have gotten worse. We see death all the time with people who, are using a bad batch, but they're playing Russian roulette. They don't care. And they don't care, if they've already been abandoned by their family and they have nothing. What else do they have to lose, they feel? So what we try and do is we identify those people that have those issues, and then we try and see what we can do to resolve them. Some aren't resolvable. I know that I can't help everyone out there. I've already, acclimated myself to the fact that, if I can help one person a week be successful, that's good enough. So we work with about 300 people a year, and it really isn't good enough. I need to know that our staff and our volunteers are really doing everything that they possibly can do to make sure that someone is aware of all of the resources that are out there so that they can, if they need the help and they want the help, they can get the help.
But they have to want the help. Basically what you're saying is that there's only so much you can do for someone. So, but even then, someone who does, in some sense or another, want to help, I imagine there must be still a great deal of a sense of isolation. Just it may be because of the family, it may be because of the experience, and trust issues may be going both ways. Not only that other people have to learn to trust the person reentering, but also that person needs to learn to trust people. But as you said, or it sounded like what I heard you saying was that feeling connected to other people, taking advantage of the things that are out there, is going to be a pretty bright line indicator of someone who's going to have success or not.
Absolutely. If you know, and you can take a look at Maslow's hierarchy, if you know that someone has their basic needs met, they've got food, they've got water, they've got shelter, okay, then you can take it up a level. What do they need next? They've got security, they've got jobs, they've got, good health. Then belongingness is important. Do they have friends? Do they, are they able to reacclimate with family? Are they able to date and feel love? And then moving, right up to the top of that pyramid. It's important, and people don't understand it. I lately am really perturbed by seeing the younger people who are coming into the criminal system who don't have to be here, but they're here because they somehow didn't make it through school. When I deal with someone, I had a young man in today. Well, young, he's 33 years old. His highest level of education was 8th grade. What is he going to be able to accomplish having an 8th grade education? Not very much at all. And when I started to speak with him and I really got to know him a little better, I found out that he dropped out of school when he was 15 because he had a twin brother, and his twin brother was murdered. And then I found out that he wasn't really doing well in school, and he had a lot of issues he thought he was learning disabled. But when we backtracked and found out that he had been hit by a car when he was a youngster, our psychologist was in the meeting with us today. We said, well, maybe he had some head trauma. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he couldn't get through school. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he's been acting out and has problems. And he has a history of assault. And for people who have traumatic brain injury, that's part of what they do. They get aggressive and they act out. And it's quite possible that this young man may have, because he has the symptoms, he may have these problems. What we do now is I'm in the process of getting his school records. Hopefully we can get his medical records. And then once all of this is consolidated, I need to refer him to an agency that is best suited to handle someone with his issues. So everybody is individual. Everybody is different and unique. And it's up to us to determine what that person needs and to connect them to whatever the resources are that can help them.
Right. And, when we look at in healthcare in general, one of the things we talk about here a lot is having the various providers, especially for people who have multiple different health issues, is having the providers talking to one another and other caregivers talking with the providers, with the healthcare providers, because it results in better care. This is something that typically has to be organized by the person, the patient, and obviously there are tools for doing that, but you have to be able to do that. So it sounds like your organization is acting as that, you said it, you're the connector. Do you get these other organizations and the other resources to talk to one another about your clients, or is it always on you?
No,
and therefore, I guess ultimately, yeah.
It can't be just on us because I don't have all of the wherewithal as far as the knowledge, or the clinical, expertise. So we need to bring in others. And every 2 weeks, we actually have started meeting with the public defender's office and one of our local mental health organizations. And there's usually anywhere from 6 to 8 of us that meet every 2 weeks, and we triage cases. So we talk about people, and that person can be in the community or they can be incarcerated waiting to get out. And then what we do is we start to talk about discharge planning and what that person needs upon release, so that we can refer them and that the other partners they do know that this person's coming. We work very closely with our local shelter. So we make a referral to the shelter. The mental health organization is aware, and so is the public defender's office. And hopefully, once all of the discharge plan is in place, then it goes all the way up to the judge, and the judge says, let's go with it. And the person gets out.
So that's, you're being proactive in trying to have a plan in place before the person hits the street.
Yes.
So that they're caught, right? You're the net to catch them as they come out of the system.
One of the things that I found out in the very beginning when I first started doing this was people get out of jail, they walk out the front door, and they have no clue who to talk to, where to go, what to do. Being that we're in the North Jersey area, this is a very transient area because we're very close to New York City. So we get a lot of people who are not really from North Jersey, but are passing through from many other areas. And when you're arrested and put into jail and you may not have any friends and you don't have any money and you walk out that door, what do? You know, you're more likely to go ahead and commit another crime because you don't have money to even get on a bus or a train to go back to where you were from. So it's interesting. So what we did was we took a look at that and said, okay, how can we best try and stop this trend? As a taxpayer in this county, I know that it costs a phenomenal amount of money to house somebody who is committing crime. So what can I do on my part to help reduce that? And so we took a look at it, and that's why we took a look at the criminogenic factors that, you know, people are involved with and said, how can we address these issues? So whether it be housing, whether it be, you know, getting them food stamps or health care or, you know, services for their addiction or setting them up with NA meetings, whatever we can do, that's what we're the pivotal point to make all of that happen, because that's what is needed. It's like almost taking your village and making sure that everyone has a responsibility for somebody that's coming new into the community.
Now, you mentioned your role as taxpayer. I'm guessing that that's not how you first got involved, was being angry about your property taxes. And you didn't start your career as a social worker, right?
No. My background is in human resources.
So then what got you involved in this?
So I was on a board with, I believe, a technical school way back when, and somebody else who was on the board actually approached me and said, would you be interested in coming into the jail every once in a while to talk to people about what they need to do to get jobs when they get out? And I did that for a while. And then back in 2009, I actually got more involved. That's when the Second Chance Act was signed, and we were doing more with reentry in the community. And I said, you know, it's not just about resumes. It's not just about getting a job. These people need so much more before they get a job. So what can we do to try and facilitate all of those basic needs and work up to them getting a job? Because they're not going to be able to keep a job if they have no place to sleep, if they have no place to shower, if they, you know, don't have a closet where they can change their clothes. It's just not going to happen. So we really started to look at things a little bit differently. And that's when I said, well, you know what? There's nobody out there that's doing this. There's not one agency that's devoted just to helping people come out of jail or prison and spend time with them. There's agencies out there that, of course, you know, will help with clothing, and they'll help other people, you know, get a job, and but nobody that was devoted to, you know, the formerly incarcerated population. And that's when I said, we have to do this.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, Bonnie, and thank you for the work you do, and thanks for being a part of Connected Care Live.
Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate the fact that you've given me an opportunity to talk about what we do, and thanks for your questions. And I hope hope you've learned something from it, because I'm always learning something from talking to people, and I appreciate your feedback.
Absolutely have. Thank you.
To get more insights and information from healthcare innovators and pioneers, go to www.solutionize.com.